Welcome back to the Road to National series. In today's episode, I'm going to take you through a lower deload workout. So on my deload weeks and deload workouts, I still do somewhat of a primary movement, and today I fancied doing some trap bar deadlift. So I did 180 kilos, which is just 60% of my 1 rep max because I've hit a 300 kilo trap bar deadlift before, and I did that for 2 sets of 5. So these were nice and smooth, and a trap bar deadlift, I sort of feel like it's halfway between a deadlift and a squat because you are able to get your hips through because the bar's not in the way. It almost becomes more of like leg drive into the floor. That feels like more of a limiting factor, and a little bit upper back, but it's slightly different to a normal deadlift hinge. So it's like halfway between a squat and a deadlift in my eyes. So because this week I'm just doing one lower deload workout, I mentioned this in my last video, but my lower dynamics spilt over onto Monday of this deload week. That was because of the extreme heat over the weekend and some other factors. I talked through those in that video, but I'm just doing one deload lower week because I think that's more optimal for my training, giving myself a little bit of more rest and ready for next week. And technically I have sort of done 2 lower training sessions this week. It's just one of them was my lower dynamic from last week. So that was the logic there, picking something sort of halfway between a squat and a deadlift because I normally do both during a deload week. Then moving on to the first accessory here, it is belt squat. So I did 150 kilos for 2 sets of 10. These moved really easily, and I was trying out my new belt squat belt because I've been finding that when I've been using chains or anything with buckles, it has been digging into my inner thighs so much, particularly when the weight gets heavier, and it's been literally like rubbing all the skin off my inner thighs. So it's been really uncomfortable, and that has been the limiting factor. However, that belt was so comfy. It was fantastic. I went all the way up to 150 kilos, which is somewhat heavy for me. I've done 200 kilos before, but the reason I did that was to test out that belt and make sure that even at heavier weights, it was not irritating my inner thighs, and I literally felt nothing. It was fantastic to be able to push hard on those belt squats. So very excited for that. I'm probably going to include them in my next block of training. I want to go much heavier though. I want to go like 250, 300 kilos on them. So that was good, and those moved really easily. Also, I didn't have any knee sleeves on, which I normally use just to make my knees feel better, particularly because I've been working through a right knee injury. If you followed the channel and the series for a while, you'll have known that. But basically, it's a great thing that I'm able to do belt squats 150 kilos now with no knee pain on that right side, even without knee sleeves. So I was happy with that as well. Then moving on to the next accessory here, I've got single leg hamstring curls just on the quad extension. You can do this on any quad extension, by the way. If you're in a commercial gym and the hamstring curl machine's taken, but the quad extension's free and you're wanting to hit hamstring curls, and maybe there's like a group of, I don't know, 5 teenagers, that's a common thing, and they're on one machine, or usually it's the bench press, but they're on it for like half an hour and you're like, oh, I really need to do this exercise. You can use a quad extension, just do these standing single leg hamstring curls. So I love this exercise, and I went very light today, just pumping up the hamstrings, but it still did provide quite a solid burn in the hamstrings. I was trying to control the weight more. Normally I'm trying to like attack and contract as fast as I can on the hamstrings to work on like the explosive strength of the hamstrings, but here I was just trying to get a pump, and it really did work. So on the first set I got 2 sets of 25, like 1 on each leg, but on the second sets here on each leg I only did a set of 20. And that's because it was burning so much when I hit rep number 20. I was just thinking, look, it's a deload week. You need to be smart. I can push to like 25 reps again on these second sets, but that would be basically pushing to failure, and it would be so sore at that stage. It would probably like take days to get rid of the DOMs. Instead, I just wanted to be smart. The whole point of the deload week is to prime me for my next block of training, so there is no point pushing to failure. Reserve that for when I'm doing my actual training training. So my hamstrings felt great after this, a bit of a pump and a tiny bit sore from those. Like I said, it did actually pump them up pretty effectively. So moving on to the next exercise here, I did elevated heel calf raises. So the block I'm doing is a 4-inch elevation, which is quite high. It's sort of thicker than any bumper plate you'll encounter. So 4 inches is great for getting a huge stretch on the calves, which is what I was doing here. I just left 150 kilos on the belt squat because it's very easy and practical, because I had that already set up with my belt squats earlier. And these move well. I think I got 2 sets of 15. The last few reps were pretty challenging. I normally find when I do like elevated calf raises like this, I find it much harder to contract all the way up. So if I do calf raises just off the flat ground, like I find it easy to contract all the way up. But when you go into a deep stretch, for whatever reason, the transition from going from a deep stretch through the midpoint and up into the contraction feels much more challenging. But these still moved great. They were good. They were probably the only exercise I did basically at the same sort of weight and weight, reps and intensity that I would even on a normal week of training. And that's because my calves are just genetically a strong point, but can take a lot of punishments. The calves, obviously, you're walking around on them all day. So you are able, they have like a high work capacity. They're used to supporting your whole body weight. They're like the strongest muscle in your body. When you're able to like single leg calf raise your entire body weight as if it's nothing multiple times over, which most people can do, it shows how strong the calves are. Like you couldn't do that with any other isolated muscle like your bicep or something. So that calf training went well. Then moving on to the next accessory here, I had hip adduction. So I did banded ones of these, and again I kept it very light. I think I did 2 sets of 30 per leg, and sometimes I only do 1 set per side, because when I use like heavier and higher band tensions, more resistance, both legs do get involved. This time I was trying to keep the standing leg very passive and just contracting the moving leg, the leg that has the band attached to it. But I've spoken previously in different episodes about how if you do have like a heavy band, you are actually hitting both adductors. They're both squeezing in. However, today I sort of relaxed that standing leg a bit more. It didn't have to like pull against the ground in order to contract my legs together. I was just contracting the standing leg, and it did actually achieve a pretty good burn in the adductor of the leg that was working. So I was surprised by that. I thought sets of 30 at this sort of tension, I'd just eat them up and have no problem whatsoever. I do also think this marks like an improvement in strength for me. I think that this was basically the band setup I used to use for my working sets of like 20 a while ago. So this is like ridiculously light for me now. So my adductors have definitely got stronger. I started dedicated training them since the beginning of this series, and I've also been doing like roller adductions, which is where I go down into the splits and up. That's my favorite variation. I didn't do it this week because it's usually heavier. I can only get like 5 to 8 reps, so it's not really applicable for my deload weeks, but that has contributed to a massive increase in strength in my adductors. So that is nice to see. The legs have also got much bigger because of that. And then the final exercise here, I was doing the Captains of Crush 2, just for 2 sets of 5 per hand. So I just had a miscellaneous lower exercise programmed, and whilst it was a deload week, I thought I'd work on my grip. It is feeling a little bit weaker recently for like deadlifts, so I just wanted to work on that. So that is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff, and thanks for watching.